The soft hum of the Academy's energy field pulsed in the background, a low, constant vibration that students from every corner of the galaxy had long since tuned out. The grand hall shimmered with translucent walls, offering an unbroken view of the distant stars. Thousands of students from dozens of species sat in staggered rows, their eyes, or other sensory organs, fixed on the central holographic display of the Milky Way galaxy. Professor Zorlax's voice echoed through the chamber, a deep, resonating hum that vibrated in the chests of those present. His 6 eyes blinked in a slow, deliberate pattern as he hovered beside the projection. The next topic in our study of intergalactic law is perhaps the most controversial, he said, tapping one of his appendages on a floating control panel. The galaxy rotated, zooming in on a specific region, Sol. The room grew quieter. Humanity, Zorlax continued, his voice heavier now, classified as a Category Omega species, banned from intergalactic travel, diplomacy, and all forms of contact with Galactic Union species. His eyes scanned the room, noting the ripple of murmurs among the students. He allowed it for a moment before raising an appendage, silencing them instantly. You are all aware of the prohibition, but I see from your faces that many of you are wondering why. Jaru leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. His smooth, obsidian skin shimmered under the hall's soft lights. He had always been the type to question everything, a trait that had earned him both admiration and reprimands. His clawed hand rose slowly into the air. Professor, Jaru said, his voice sharp but respectful. Every species listed as Category Omega has been classified for specific reasons. Biological contagion, resource consumption, or predatory behavior. But humans? They don't fit any of those categories. So why are they banned? The question hung in the air longer than it should have. Other students glanced at each other, nodding in silent agreement. Everyone had wondered this at some point, but none had dared ask outright. Professor Zorlax remained still for a moment, his eyes locking onto Jaru. Some questions, the professor said slowly, are better left unanswered. He swiped the air, and the holographic display of Earth vanished, replaced by a list of unrelated case studies. Focus your attention on the Xylorian Accords for the next portion of this lecture. A soft wave of discontent rippled through the students. Whispers grew louder. The floating orbs that monitored student activity blinked red, a subtle warning for silence. Jaru sat back, his gaze still fixed on the spot where Earth's image had been. His mind churned, unable to let go of the question. Later, in the student commons, the buzz of conversation filled the air. The large, multi-species lounge hummed with overlapping languages, clattering appendages, and bursts of bioluminescent flashes from certain species communicating silently. Jaru sat with 3 others at a circular table near the observation deck. They always dodge the question, Jaru muttered, his eyes locked on the distant view of the galaxy. His friend Jorah, a reptilian with emerald scales and slit-pupil eyes, leaned in, his voice a low hiss. Of course they dodge it, Jorah said. Because if we knew the truth, we'd never look at them the same way. He picked at a piece of synthetic meat on his tray with his clawed fingers. I heard humans destroyed their own homeworld with weapons that could turn oceans to vapor. False, interjected Bryn, a gelatinous being whose voice emanated from somewhere deep within its translucent body. Their world still exists. I looked it up. Bryn's form shifted in color, cycling through pale blue to deep orange, a sign of mild agitation. They didn't destroy it. They chose to leave it. Jaru frowned, his eyes narrowing. That doesn't make any sense. Why leave your home if it's still livable? Exactly, Jorah said, tapping his claw on the table. That's what makes them suspicious. They left it behind and never looked back. What kind of species just abandons its cradle world? Maybe they were forced out, Bryn suggested, undulating slightly. Maybe something stronger than them drove them away. Silence followed. The idea of something stronger than a Category Omega species was unsettling. Jaru leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. Or maybe they left because they didn't want to be found. Jorah's eyes flicked toward him. You've got that look again, Jorah. What look? The one you get before you do something reckless, Jorah hissed, leaning in closer. Don't even think about it. I know what you're planning. I'm not planning anything, Jorah lied, though his eyes betrayed him. I just think it's strange that we're supposed to be the most advanced academy in the galaxy, but none of us can answer a simple question. Bryn shifted to a deep purple. Some questions are dangerous, Jorah. Even knowing the answer can make you a target. Since when is knowing something a threat? Jorah shot back, his frustration finally boiling over. They've taught us every cosmic secret from star collapse to temporal anomalies. But this is where they draw the line. He shook his head. Whoa. I'm done being told what not to ask. Jorah exhaled a sharp hiss, his eyes darting toward the nearby security drones. Keep your voice down. Jorah leaned in, his voice a low, determined growl. I'm going to find out the truth. Are you in or not? The table fell silent. Jorah glanced at Bryn, who pulsed a flickering orange, a sign of uncertainty. No one spoke for a moment. Then Jorah groaned, slumping forward. We're going to get expelled. Not if we're careful, Jorah said. His eyes locked on the distant stars beyond the observation deck. I'm done being afraid of shadows. Bryn's glow dimmed. You really think they'll just let us walk into the restricted archives? They monitor everything. Jorah smiled. Monitors can be tricked. Doors can be opened. They taught us that too, remember? The three of them sat in silence, the faint hum of the station all around them. No one spoke it out loud, but the decision had already been made. Beyond the glass, the galaxy spun slowly, endless and indifferent. Somewhere in that vast sea of stars lay a small blue planet. Sealed off, unvisited and unwelcome. Jorah's eyes lingered on it, his gaze hard with resolve. If they don't want us to see it, that's exactly why we should. The security drones were relentless. Metallic clanks echoed behind them, each impact like a countdown to capture. Red beams of light swept across the hallway, scanning for movement. Jorah's heart pounded in his chest as he sprinted ahead of Jorah and Bryn, his claws scraping against the smooth floor with every step. His lungs burned, but he didn't dare slow down. Left! Jorah shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. Jorah pivoted, nearly losing his footing, but he regained balance and bolted down the side corridor. The hum of drones grew louder. The sound was no longer distant. It was close. Bryn's amorphous body flattened and slid under a narrow maintenance hatch, re-emerging on the other side. They're gaining. Bryn's colors pulsed in rapid flashes of red and orange. Panic. No kidding. Jorah growled, glancing back just in time to see a drone round the corner. Its scanning beam flickered past him, missing by inches. Jorah, tell me you've got a plan. Working on it. Jorah barked, eyes darting ahead. His mind raced. Every corridor looked the same. Smooth metal walls with no cover, no concealment. But then he spotted it. A side access hatch marked with maintenance symbols. He veered toward it, yanking open the latch and gesturing for the others. Now. Jorah dove in first, his claws scraping the edges of the hatch. Bryn followed, oozing through the narrow gap with ease. Jorah slid in last, slamming the hatch shut behind him. They all went still, holding their breath as the thudding footsteps of drones echoed just outside. A beam of red light flashed through the seam of the hatch, scanning briefly before moving on. The metallic thuds grew fainter, heading deeper into the corridor. Tell me that worked, Jorah whispered, his breath ragged. For now, Jorah muttered, leaning his head against the cool metal of the hatch. His heart still pounded, but the urgency of it had dulled. He glanced around the cramped space. It was a narrow service tunnel, lined with cables and conduits. The dim glow of power relays lit the corridor in flickering orange light. Bryn pulsed faintly with relief, his color settling into a calm, pale blue. That was close. Too close. Close is fine, Jorah said, wiping his brow. Caught is the problem. He turned to Jaru. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. So tell me, was it worth it? Jaru didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the ground, his breathing still uneven. Finally he looked up, his gaze sharp, unwavering. You saw it, Jaru said quietly. That wasn't a fleet being destroyed. That was control. They didn't fire a single shot. Jorah snorted, running a claw through his head spines. Yeah, I saw it. So what? It's just another reason to stay away from them. They don't play fair. They don't play normal. You're missing the point, Jaru replied, leaning forward. All this time they made it seem like humanity was dangerous because they were wild, unpredictable, out of control. He shook his head. But that wasn't chaos. That was precision. Precision or not, Bryn muttered. We just flagged ourselves as curious students with unauthorized access. You know how the Academy handles that. We'll be lucky if all they do is erase our memories. Jorah tapped a claw against his head. If they wipe my memory, I won't even care. It'll be like none of this ever happened. Maybe that's better. Jaru's eyes darkened. No, it's not. Jorah scoffed. His eyes filled with doubt. Oh, come on. You're telling me you'd rather live knowing that thing exists? Knowing they can just blink fleets out of existence? He leaned in, eyes narrowing. What are you even hoping to do with this knowledge, Jaru? It's not like we're going to change anything. Jaru stared at him for a long moment, unblinking. I'm not trying to change them. I'm trying to understand them. The silence that followed was heavier than the air itself. Jorah leaned back, letting out a long, slow breath. He glanced at Bryn, then back at Jaru. You really think that's a good idea? I think it's the only idea, Jaru said firmly. If you know something is dangerous, you don't look away. You study it. You figure out how it works. His eyes flickered with determination. That's how you stay ahead. Bryn's glow dimmed. Sometimes, knowing too much is worse than knowing nothing at all. I'm done being afraid of the unknown, Jaru shot back, his voice cold as steel. Fear is exactly what they want. It's how they control us. But knowledge, that's control we get to keep. The glow of emergency lights flickered again, and the hum of power relays grew louder. Bryn shifted uneasily, their color fluctuating between orange and gray. Control or not, they're still looking for us. Then we stay ahead, Jaru said, rising to his feet. His eyes moved along the maintenance corridor, scanning for an access point. This tunnel leads to the east wing. We can reach the transport deck from there. You want to run? Jorah asked, raising a brow. After all that talk about control. No, Jaru replied, eyes sharp as ever. I want to disappear. Just like those warships. Jorah blinked, realization dawning on him. You think you can do what they did? Not yet, Jaru admitted. But if I figure it out, nobody will ever be able to stop me. They moved through the narrow tunnel in silence, each step calculated, every noise measured. Jaru led, his eyes scanning every junction, every flickering light. His thoughts were a storm, his mind replaying the footage over and over. The look on that human's face, the calm certainty, the simple, undeniable power in those words. You shouldn't have pushed us. Jaru understood now. The prohibition on humans wasn't about protecting the galaxy from them. It was about hiding something bigger. Something that had been hidden for so long, it had become legend. He could feel it in his bones. The truth was closer than ever. Jorah broke the silence. You realize if they catch us, this isn't just detention. We're talking permanent record. Galactic Council review. This is serious. Good, Jaru said, never slowing his pace. Serious means we're on the right path. Spoken like someone who's never faced a tribunal, Jorah muttered, shaking his head. You're lucky I'm too stubborn to leave you behind. Luck has nothing to do with it, Jaru replied, his tone like sharpened glass. You saw it, Jorah. You know what they're hiding. Bryn flickered to an orange hue. Saw it too. But I wish I hadn't. Yeah, Jorah muttered, glancing over his shoulder. Me too. Jorah didn't look back. His eyes remained fixed on the path ahead, every step more deliberate than the last. The hum of distant drones still echoed through the walls, but he didn't flinch. The look in the human's eyes haunted him, not because of fear but because of certainty. No doubt, no hesitation, pure absolute control. Jorah didn't want to run anymore. He didn't want to hide. He wanted to understand, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever been told to look away from something dangerous. He'd spent his whole life being told to fear the unknown, but now he knew better. The unknown wasn't something to fear. It was something to master. And mastery always started with a single question. How did they do it?